iawn a chroeso cynnes iawn I chi I webinar Cyswllt Ffermio. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Farming Connect webinar. We are discussing tonight the small grant scheme that there's two small grant schemes from Welsh Government. I'm Erin Williams and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. We do have translation available, so there will be parts of the meeting in Welsh. So if you require translation, can you click on the interpretation tab on your screen and select the English? If you do experience any difficulties, then please let us know through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. Felly, fel o'n i'n sôn, bwriad webinar heno I roi gwybod I chi am ddau gynllun grant, sef grantiau bach effeithlonrwydd a grantiau bach amgylcheddol. A ni'n ffodus iawn I gael cwmni dau berson o Lywodraeth Cymru, sef Richard Evans a Kevin Taylor o Is-adran Amaeth Cynaladwyedd a Datblygu Llywodraeth Cymru. A mae'r ddau wedi bod yn gyfrifol am ddatblygu'r cynlluniau grant yma. Felly ni mynd I lygad y ffynnon fel petai a cael gwybodaeth oddi wrth y ddau sydd wedi bod yn gyfrifol am lunio'r y cynlluniau. Bydd yna gyfle I chi holi cwestiynau ar y diwedd, felly dim ond I chi teipio nhw mewn ar y Q&A a byddan nhw'n gobeithio allwn ni ateb y rhan fwyaf nhw heno. Mae'r webinar hefyd yn cael ei recordio a mi fydd ar gael ar wefan Cyswllt Ffermio mor gyntedd y gallwn ni. Ac os byddwn ni wedi methu ateb rhai o'r cwestiynau yn ystod yr webinar, mi fydd Richard a Kevin hefyd yn ateb y cwestiynau yna a mi fydd rhywna hefyd ar gael ar ôl yr atebion ar gael mor gyntedd y gallwn ni ar ôl y cyfarfod. Felly, heb oedi mwy, hoffwn I gyflwyno ein siaradwr cyntaf I chi, sef Richard Evans o Lywodraeth Cymru. A mae Richard yn mynd I sôn heno wrthyn ni am y grantiau bach effeithlonrwydd. Mae Richard yn wyneb cyfarwydd I ni wedi bod ar sawl webinar yn ystod yr cyfnod y diweddar yma, felly croeso mawr iawn ato ni Richard.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. I'll just get the presentation up. So rwy'n just dweud bod chi'n gweld hwnna?
Ydyn ni'n gweld Richard?
Oce, wel, diolch yn fawr am y cyfle I ddod I gasgwrs gyda chi heno. Felly, grantiau bach effeithlonrwydd, dyn ni'n mynd I sôn. I'm just going to do the initial part of this presentation in Welsh, but I'll turn to English after a few slides. Felly, pwrpas y cynllun yma yw mewn ffordd grant cyfalaf bach ar gyfer ffermwyr I wella perfformiad technegol, ariannol ac amgylcheddol I busnesau. Felly mae fe'n siŵr o fod mae'r math o sgîm yma yn gyfarwydd iawn I rhan fwyaf ohonoch chi os nach chi gyd. Mae fe'n ddatblygiad o'r hen grantiau bach ffermwyr o'r FBG, y Farm Business Grant. Ond mae yna rhai newidiadau iddo fe, felly dyna be fewn ni trwyddo nawr I ddangos y gwahaniaethau. O ran y prif wybodaeth, mae'r ffenest ymgeisio eisoes ar agor ac mae fe'n cau ar y 90 o Fehefin. A mae'r cyllideb ar gyfer ffenest yma yn 5 miliwn. Yn debyg, ond ddim yn union un peth ar FBG, mae'r fe'n seiliedig ar fodel costau cyfeiriedig, felly y reference cost model.
Mae'n ddrwg da fi dorri ar draws ti, Richard, ond dyw'r sleids ddim yn symud mlaen I fod yn onest. Maen nhw yn aros ar y sleid gyntaf, a I ni yn gweld y sleids sydd ar yr ochr chwith hefyd.
Reit, fel dwi ddim.
Ie, mae'n symud trwyddo fel yna, so falle na'r ffordd I wneud e.
Na I fel la.
Diolch.
Felly, jyst I chi cyfle I fallen hwnna o'ch barn chi, mae'r ffenest ar agor tan y 90 o Fehefin, cyllideb o 5 miliwn ac yn sgîm yn reference cost model, felly costau cyfeiriedig. Felly, gwerth y grant yn debyg iawn i'r sgîm blaenorol, i'r chafswm o 12,000, ond mae'r lleafswm wedi dod lawr I 1,000, yn hytrach na 2,000 gyda'r FBG. Ar ochr arall, mae'r cyfyngiadau o ran trosiant lle yn y gorffennol roedd angen i'r busnes gael trosiant yn llai na 1 miliwn, mae'r rheol yna wedi cael ei ddileu. 40 y grant yn 40% tuag at y buddsoddiad, ac yn bwysig iawn, os bod chi wedi ymgeisio ar gyfer y grant busnes i fferm o'r blaen, dyw hwnna ddim yn effeithio ar eich gallu chi i fynd am y grant llawn yma. Felly, ni wedi dechrau ar stretad lan a mae 12,000 ar gael i bob busnes fferm eto. So just to go to in terms of eligibility, the usual requirements: producer of agricultural products, 3 hectares of eligible agricultural land, registered with RPW, or you can demonstrate 550 standard labour hours. Only items included on the list of eligible items will attract funding. So the list has been prepared, and the one I'll come back to over and over again is whatever items you purchase, they have to meet or exceed the minimum specification. So applications submitted through RPW online as previous grant schemes. The EOI was scored according to the guidance. The scoring criteria is in the guidance for you to see. And if you're selected, as with all other grant schemes, you're offered a contract through RPW online. You'll have to accept the contracts within 30 days. If you don't accept it, the money will be reallocated to another applicant. And if you're selected, you have to apply, you have to purchase all of the items that you purchased. The claim period has been extended to 180 days for this window, so slightly longer to be able to purchase and claim your items. As you claim the items, you'll need to provide evidence that the payment has been made. So this is slightly different to a previous scheme. So a copy of the bank statement to show the expenditure going out. You will need invoices for all claimed items, evidence that the purchased items meet the grant specification, and as another change, a geotag photograph of the item on your premises. Now, just to go back to the invoices, and I mentioned earlier, it is a reference cost scheme. What that means is that we've set the standard cost for all items, and that is the maximum payment that we'll give for that item. However, if the invoice that you, the actual purchase cost as evidence in the invoice is less than our reference cost, we will pay 40% of the invoice cost and not 40% of the reference cost. So that is slightly different. You will only be paid 40% of actual invoiced cost. If the purchase cost is higher than our reference costs, the claim will be limited to 40% of the reference cost. There's examples of this in the guidance, and it's probably explained better than what I can explain it to you here. So I do suggest that you read that section just to, so there's no surprises when you submit the claims later on. Just a couple of things that quite often, some of the issues that we have. If you have problems securing items or they haven't been delivered by the claim date, please let us know through your online account, explaining the situation. If you got messages from the supplier explaining why it can't be delivered by the date and so on, please include those. We will, if you have a genuine reason, give an extension to the contract from the 180 days. But to be aware, we cannot extend contracts beyond 31st of March 2023. This budget has to be spent within this financial year. So there's only a small opportunity for an extension beyond the 180 days claim period. We will send you reminders of your claim dates and when you submit the claims before the dates come up. So there will be regular RPW reminders for you. So some key messages. If you submit an EOI, make sure that you intend and can purchase all items. Only purchase items after you've been offered a contract. Now, there's a key difference here. Previously, you could not purchase the items until you had signed and accepted a contract. Now, that opportunity has been brought forward. So once you've received an offer on your RPW online account, you can then make inquiries and actually order and purchase the item before you've accepted the contract. So that does give you an opportunity to highlight any problems if, when you've accepted the contract, you make inquiries and you're having problems securing the item, well, you can let us know before you've accepted the contract, and then we'll can deal with those issues on a case-by-case basis. Again, I come back to the point, make sure the item meets the specification. If your supplier or a dealer tells you, yes, this item meets the specifications, it's been bought before, the specifications have been amended, have been tweaked and developed, don't necessarily take the word of the supplier, check yourself, read the specification and compare it to the item that's being offered to you. Submit a claim by the claim deadline, and please submit all the supporting documentation. So evidence of payment, copy of the invoice, evidence that it meets a spec, and a geotag photograph. So all in all, it's quite, again, it remains quite a straightforward scheme, relatively easy to apply for, and the requirements to claim the grant is as limited and small amount of information that we need, but we need it on time by the claim deadline and all the documents complete if possible. The guidance is available on that website, and we'll come to questions after the next presentation on the Small Grants Environment Scheme.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Richard, am y cyflwyniad cryno yna. Many thanks for that presentation. I can see there's one comment on the Q&A saying that the translation isn't working. Can I ask you, if you do require translation, to click on the interpretation tab and select English? It should be working now, but if, as I said, if you do experience any problems, come back to us. But you should have understood that presentation, the majority of it was in English, and it will be available, as I said, after the meeting, before the end of the week, hopefully. Felly, awn ni mlaen nawr i'r cyflwyniad nesaf, a hoffwn ni groesawu Kevin Taylor ato ni. Mae Kevin Taylor yn rheolwr polisi'r schemes newydd yma, a mae Kevin hefyd wedi bod yn ymwneud gyda datblygu yr cynlluniau newydd. Felly bydd Kevin yn sôn am y grantiau bach amgylcheddol. Felly, croeso mawr iawn ato ni, Kevin. Very warm welcome.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Eirwyn. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, tonight I'll be talking to you about the Small Grants Environment Scheme. To many of you who have had dabblings or looked into Glass-Steer small grants, a lot of this will be quite familiar to you. It is basically a carryover from that scheme. There's been a few little tweaks and things, but it's mostly the same. But it's useful to go over what it's all about in the sort of domestically funded world of the schemes that are coming up now post EU RDP. So there'll be three themes for small grants environment, the same as there was for Glass-Steer small grants, which is carbon, with the objective obviously to lock up more carbon, landscape and pollinators to provide better habitat linkages for pollinating insects and enhance landscape features. And for, next slide please, Fionn, for this theme that's coming up now, that is open now, which is water, that is obviously mainly to improve water quality and reduce the risk of flooding. Next slide, please. So the timing and the budget, the expression of interest window opened on the 23rd of May, and it will close on the 1st of July. The budget for this window is 3 million. and the maximum grant, as it was for Justice Small Grants, is £7,500. Next slide, please. The eligibility criteria, a lot of this will be familiar to you from just a few minutes ago, so apologies if it's a repetition, but maybe it's useful to sort of keep repeating. You need to be a primary producer of agricultural products. You must have either 3 hectares of eligible agricultural land, which must be registered with Rural Payments Wales, or you're able to demonstrate over 550 standard labour hours. Next slide, please. So some changes from Glasgow Small Grants to Small Grants Environment. Unlike previously, we will be asking you to, if you are doing any hedge work, to submit a much wider picture of the entire length of the hedgerow that requires restoration under the scheme. This is in order for us to make an assessment of the work that was probably needed to restore the hedge, and whether there's been any sort of excessive management carried out on the hedge, so we can see the numbers of trees, whether parts of the hedge could have been laid rather than coppiced, for example. We've also included a specification for the establishment of what we're currently calling edge woodlands, which are very small, narrow corridors of woodland. The idea of this is to enable farmers to create small woodlands, but remain eligible for the basic payment scheme, whilst still excluding livestock from the newly planted area. Essentially, for landscape features in cross compliance, they can extend to a maximum of 10-metre width. So what we'll be asking you to consider is, if you want to create small woodlands that remain eligible for BPS, then you can create these woodlands taken from the centre of the hedge out to the extent of where you're going to create the woodland. As long as it's 10 metres or less, it will be considered a landscape feature under cross compliance, and it will remain eligible for BPS. Next slide, please. Submitting the expression of interest. Again, these have got to be submitted through RPW Online. The expression of interest will be scored and ranked in order to, according to the scoring criteria. And if your EOI is selected, you'll be offered a contract through your RPW Online account. Next, please. If your EOI is successful, you must accept the contract within 30 calendar days of the offer. If your EOI is selected, all the capital works applied for must be completed. Obviously, if there's any issues, genuine issues that prevent you from being able to do that, then, like as Richard said previously, you can submit a message on your RPW Online, and each case will be considered on its merits as to whether we can sort of give you some relief from doing all of the capital works you originally selected. All capital works, again, must exceed or meet the minimum specifications set out in the technical booklet, which is also published online at the moment. Next slide, please. When you claim, you've got to submit the claim using the capital works claim page on your RPW Online account. When you do submit your claim, you must submit before and after geotag photographs of the capital works you're claiming. So before you start work on anything that you're doing, you need to take a picture using the geotagging functionality on your camera or phone camera. So before you did the work, and from roughly the same position once the work is completed, so that we can see that it is the correct location, what have you, the way you carried out the work. Again, you must submit the claim by the deadline. Next slide, please. At the EOI stage, so key messages, beg your pardon. At the EOI, make sure you can complete all the capital works that you've selected, barring what I've said previously about any sort of exceptional circumstances that prevent you doing so. You've got to ensure the capital works meets the required specification, and very importantly, you must ensure that you've obtained all the necessary legal consents required to carry out the capital works. Otherwise, you know, you may find yourself getting a visit from NRW, the local authority, particularly in respect of clearing out ditches. And many of these ditches tend to be ordinary watercourses, which require ordinary watercourse consent from the local authority, or flood risk activity permits from NRW. Also, there's things like a fenning license if you're coppicing trees. It's always best to just go out and get that straight away, regardless of whether it's successful. If you want to carry out any work around the farm on trees, it's just best to have a felling license to hand. Next slide, please. Regarding other types of sort of referrals to NRW, rural payments will do this for you over any what we call overlying sort of restrictive layers, usually for species from Natural Resources Wales, for them to comment as to the appropriateness and whether they can be included in your contract. Glasteer Advanced contract holders remain ineligible to apply. The reason for that is because they have had Glasteer Advanced contract holders have had a contract manager visit who has given them a tailored agreement to suit all the objectives on their farm. So we don't want we don't want small grants environment introducing capital works that may be contrary to those objectives. And finally, no extensions, as Richard mentioned earlier on, will be granted beyond the 31st of March 2023, because we're in that kind of financing situation now where we have to operate to financial years, and it's important that all the money is claimed by the end of March 2023. I think that's me. Yeah, thank you for listening, and over to any questions later on.